We have in our heads one of the most complex and mysterious of all nature's designs. Whether we're conscious of them or not, our brains are constantly at work, regulating our bodies and processing vast amounts of information. Our brains control everything we do and all that we are, from keeping our hearts beating to telling us we're in love, from learning about the world around us to communicating with our friends and families. It's all thanks to our brains. In order to perform the countless functions we take for granted, the brain needs a constant supply of blood. But sometimes that blood flow is interrupted or cut off. The resulting injury is called a stroke.
The emotional impact is just devastating because you can't quite understand why things aren't working. So it's almost like an attack on your identity. It's just unbelievable. Never felt such strong emotions.
Anyone can suffer a stroke at any time of their life. Strokes attack without warning, and their effects can be profound.
150,000 people roughly have a stroke every year, and that equates to about 1 every 5 minutes. It's the third most common cause of death and the single most common cause of disability. Of the 150,000 who have their stroke every year, about 1,000 of those will be under 30. Children and babies sadly also have strokes. It's no respecter of age, unfortunately.
Strokes can affect a person's speech, their mobility, their eyesight, even their personality. In an instant, they can transform a fit and healthy person into someone who's bedbound and needing constant care. For family and loved ones, the aftermath of a stroke can be incredibly challenging. Often it's the person closest to the survivor who takes on responsibility for their care and well-being. There is help and support available, but it's a difficult road ahead.
I was absolutely devastated. I somehow feared that I might lose her. I in a way, didn't think that she might live and survive.
For many people, to suffer a stroke is to step into an uncharted world. Some may encounter problems with perceptions, emotions, or behaviour. The loss of abilities and the challenges of rehabilitation can result in low mood or depression. This film is designed to help stroke survivors and their loved ones through the recovery process. We will hear from stroke specialists and people who have made the journey you are just beginning about the range of support and services available. We will show you how to reduce the risk of further strokes and what you can do to assist your recovery. Most importantly, we will hear some inspiring stories of how courage and determination can overcome the impairments a stroke leaves behind, and how survivors can continue to recover, one day at a time. Northwick Park Hospital in Harrow. Every year, around 1,600 stroke survivors will begin their journey to recovery here. The stroke unit serves Harrow, Brent and parts of Ealing, and is one of 8 hyperacute stroke centres in London. In charge of stroke services is senior consultant Dr. David Cohen. With a career stretching back more than 30 years, Dr. Cohen began specialising in stroke in 1993.
The brain is very sensitive to losing its blood supply. So if the blood supply to the brain is cut off even for a few minutes, the brain can be permanently damaged. And a stroke basically happens when the blood supply to part of the brain is interrupted and the brain is damaged. Northwick Park was chosen to be one of the hospitals which offers a 24/7 service, which is why we get patients from all over the northwest London area. We're able to assess people for clot-busting drugs and to give those clot-busting drugs 24/7. It's a very expensive thing to have people on call and have scanners available all the time. And therefore in London we specifically decided that only a few hospitals would offer that service.
Anyone who has a new stroke is brought immediately to a hyperacute unit, and the aim is that every person in London is within 30 minutes of a hyperacute unit. So they will come to one of the 8 units and they'll spend about 72 hours there, and in that time we do the initial assessments, try and find out why the stroke happened, put in place a plan to try and prevent another stroke happening. All stroke patients coming through the unit will have a CT scan. A CT is a specialised brain scan, and that gives us a very good idea of where the stroke is, what sort of stroke it is, and some idea of the damage to the brain.
How old is your son? Does he look after himself, or is he...
Running a busy, cutting-edge stroke unit is a huge task. There are 95 nurses alone on Herrick and Haldane wards, and a whole host of doctors and support staff providing round-the-clock care for up to 50 patients at any given time. But what really sets Northwick Park Stroke Unit apart is its multidisciplinary team.
The multidisciplinary team is a fantastic group of people who are basically trained in looking at all the different aspects of stroke. So of course we've got doctors and nurses, but we have physiotherapists who deal with problems with movement. We have occupational therapists who deal with problems doing what we call activities of daily living. We've got dietitians who look at whether you're eating the right diet, whether you need to lose some weight, whether you need to gain some weight. We have speech and language therapists who really contribute in two really important ways. One is they deal with people who have difficulties swallowing after their stroke, and they train them to recover their swallow. But they also deal with people who have difficulties expressing themselves, talking, understanding, reading and writing. We have a clinical psychologist whose main specialty is deciding not only whether people have depression or anxiety, but also whether they have thinking problems after the stroke, thinking and concentration problems.
Playing a crucial role in the multidisciplinary team is Parish Palmer and the unit's pharmacists.
My role is to make sure that an accurate medication history is got as soon as possible once a patient is admitted into the stroke unit, to make sure that the medication history is accurate for the doctors to be able to prescribe effectively and safely. Part of the role is also educating patients on their medication, on their condition, and to explain to them why it's important to take their medication and any potential side effects that they might experience.
An immediate cause for concern after a stroke is whether it has left any physical impairments which may affect the patient's ability to swallow, a condition called dysphagia, or feed themselves. If such problems are not diagnosed quickly, the patient is at risk of malnutrition or may not be able to take medication.
When they come into hospital, they'll have their swallow assessed and they may be placed nil by mouth, for example, and there the dietitian will come in, assess the nutritional requirements and formulate a nutritional plan to help them meet their requirements. Or in other cases, they may be able to eat and drink, but they can't meet their requirements for various number of reasons, and we'll put strategies in place to try and help them meet their nutritional requirements.
It's important to be able to swallow safely, because if you're swallowing a tablet and you start choking or it goes down the wrong way, that can lead to further problems. There potentially are alternatives. If you can't swallow tablets, there may be a suspension or syrup available, or a suppository or a patch.
Time is of the essence when treating stroke patients. The sooner they can be brought into hospital, the better their chances of recovery. And thanks to the multidisciplinary team, the average length of time patients are having to spend in hospital has been cut in half. Although a serious and life-changing event, in around 2/3 of stroke cases, survivors can go on to make some kind of recovery, even though parts of the brain may have been permanently damaged. And to understand why that is, we need to take a look at how the brain works. Our brains are incredibly complex. Weighing around 1.3 kilos, they contain 100 billion neurons and over 100,000 miles of blood vessels. The brain is divided into two hemispheres, left and right. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere controls the left. Strokes often damage only one of the brain's hemispheres, which is why some patients can suffer loss of movement down one side of their body, even though the other side is completely unaffected.
There are two sorts of stroke. One is called an ischemic stroke and one is called a hemorrhagic stroke. In a hemorrhagic stroke, one of the blood vessels bursts, and that means that there's no blood going to part of the brain, and in an ischemic stroke the blood vessel is blocked.
The brain has a number of different regions, each responsible for specific functions. If a stroke damages a particular region, it is very likely to result in the impairment or even total loss of the functions that part of the brain performs. The largest area of the brain is the frontal lobe. A stroke here might affect the emotions, reasoning, problem-solving skills, certain movements, and some aspects of speech. Behind that is the parietal lobe. Stroke damage to this region may affect movement, sense of touch, recognition, and orientation. The occipital lobe is where we process visual information. A stroke here could cause the patient to suffer black spots or blurred vision, hallucinations, or even blindness. Underneath the occipital lobe lies the cerebellum. A patient who suffered a stroke here may have difficulty maintaining their balance or carrying out smooth, well-coordinated movements. The temporal lobe is where we store our memories. It's also where we process and understand the things we hear. A stroke in this part of the brain may cause amnesia or the loss of the ability to recognize speech. As serious as strokes can be, the effects are not always permanent. In fact, around 2/3 of stroke survivors achieve at least some degree of recovery. In many cases, that recovery can be quite significant. Even so, it can take time, even years, for the brain and body to repair. In the early days and weeks following a stroke, the greatest difficulty patients and their loved ones face is the emotional impact.